bad.
What's up? I'm your host, Ricardo Lorenzo, also known as Ricky Brands, and another great episode for you today. We have YouTuber Titus Frost. If you've ever looked into anything in regards to the Illuminati, New World Order, PedoGate, Epstein, you're going to run into his work. And throughout the years, I definitely have, and I've been a fan of his YouTube channel for a long time, so I'll put links to that in the show description. I'll put links to his Twitter account, all his accounts in the show description on our YouTube channel, which is RV Theory 6, or you can just look up the Ripple Effect podcast. And those are some of the topics we talk about today. We talk about this Epstein, we talk about Pizzagate, we talk about the coronavirus, we talk about alternative media, talk about music, we talk about tons of different stuff, and we have a lot in common. We're both parents with kids around the same age. We both grew up in Massachusetts. We're the same age and grew up liking the same music. So it was a fun discussion, kind of talking about all those similarities and also talking about some of the taboo topics that neither Titus nor I are afraid of diving into. And sometimes when you hear Pizzagate, you immediately think, oh my God, people are going to say that's debunked and what are they talking about or whatnot. But we kind of go into some of the stuff that outside of the pizzeria itself, some of the stuff that really is interesting about it, and why people initially start believing what they believed in regards to Pizzagate. I don't want to get too much into it because we do talk about it on the show. And if you want some deep dives into it, his YouTube channel is a great resource to really connect the dots, and he'll give you names and people that are linked to one another, and tons of really good information. So I really suggest going to his YouTube channel if you want to really take a deep dive into the Pizzagate story. But we do briefly talk about it. I'll definitely have him on again because I think we only scratched the surface. We could have talked about Epstein and coronavirus and a bunch of other stuff for much longer. But I think we're both limited a little bit with kids and time or whatnot. But either way, we'll definitely do it again. It was a fun discussion. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the amount of content I'm putting out here. I really, really appreciate it. I'm doing my best to try to put out as many shows as I can during this downtime of, I guess, everything else that my life usually is involved with. So try and take advantage of it. I really appreciate everybody on Patreon from the bottom of my heart. I can't thank you guys enough for any support you're giving is just so much appreciated, especially times like this. I know some people are getting stimulus money and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, anytime you're just supporting something financially that you can get for free, regardless, it's truly a sign that you guys appreciate what I'm doing and the shows I'm putting out and the honest discussions I'm trying to have and the interesting people I'm trying to gather for these episodes. And so I really, really appreciate it, because the goal, we all have dreams, and I know that some of them can be far-fetched and sometimes hard to get to, but I never thought this podcast would grow to what it's grown into today. I've never thought that it would have as many amazing guests, looking back at just all the amazing guests I've had on. And I guess my next goal is to eventually do this full time. So I'll keep reaching for that. And I'm sure a lot of you guys listening have a little bit of extra time for reaching your goals. So hopefully if you do, then pick up that guitar that you haven't played in a while. Maybe do some drawing or painting that you haven't done in a while. Maybe start up yoga again, or going for runs, or whatever it may be. Just take this time of like the whole world slowing down to do some of the stuff you enjoy that maybe is neglected most of the year. Because especially growing up in the East Coast in Massachusetts, New Yorkers, people from Connecticut, people from Massachusetts. I mean, we live such fast-paced lives, and many of us never take the time to just sit back and enjoy, just appreciate the day, appreciate the fact that you're alive, appreciate just a simple thing. So, if nothing else good is coming out of this whole situation that we're living in and living through right now, then hopefully that's one thing we can kind of take away from it, is the fact that we can take time to maybe pursue some passions we have, and just appreciate the day. I think too often, because of our fast paced lives, I mean, a week will fly by, a day will fly by, and you take it for granted. Um, you never really think about how tomorrow's not promised. We all say that, but until like a loved one passes away or somebody passes away, and you get that little hint, that little reminder that, like, hey, you know what, like, don't take tomorrow for granted, because it's not promised. Then unfortunately we do take things for granted. So and you appreciate the company and the friends and the family that you do have, that do do allow you to hang out with them, which is always nice. So, and you probably realize that you also don't need as much entertainment and as many material things, and so many things for happiness. You don't need as much as you maybe thought for to find some happiness. You can find happiness in some simpler lifestyles. So I guess that's all I'm trying to say. Just trying to, I guess, put across some of the positives I found throughout this, and some of the positives I'm trying to look for and achieve through all this. So, well, that's it. So thanks again for the support. RV36 on Twitter, RV36 on Instagram, RV36 on my YouTube channel. Please rate the show, review the show. Anybody who's taking the time to give me 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever it may be, I truly appreciate it. It does help for people who are searching for new shows and new podcasts. It'll help people run into my show, so I really appreciate it. Download numbers keep getting bigger, and I know that's a big part of you guys spreading the word, telling your friends, tweeting it, sharing it on your Facebook pages, and word of mouth. I think it's going a long way. So little by little, we'll keep building this, and we'll all take this journey together. And that's it. See you guys on the next one. Peace.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a long story. I was just a brainwashed sheeple driving to work one day, and I saw a guy with a Rethink 9/11 sign on the I-90 overpass just west of Boston. So I was like, Rethink 9/11? What the hell is he talking about? Like, why would you even say that? And I went home and looked it up, and I was like, the hell is going on here? Why are these buildings falling at free fall and all this? And that was sort of the start of my red pilling experience, because up until that point, I had been completely brainwashed by the media. I had no idea about any of this stuff, didn't know about the New World Order. I had my suspicions about other things, like I was into ghost hunting, but I wasn't into any of like this stuff. And it just sort of hit me like a brick, and I just went running right into it. I was huge into sports, and just dropped all my passion for that and jumped right into trying to figure out what was going on. And my initial reaction was along the lines of, well, let's take it straight to them. So I went into like different hacking groups and worked with Anonymous, and we did a lot of stuff behind the scenes from late 2011 through 2015, when I moved from being, more behind the scenes to making a YouTube channel. So then I started the YouTube channel, but by then I already had a published book and, a few thousand followers on Twitter and all that type of stuff.
So people who might not be familiar with your book and some of the content you cover on your YouTube channel, what's your book about? Where can they get that? And also, what's some of the topics you cover on your YouTube channel?
So the book, my idea with that originally was I had seen the success of books like Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code and things of that nature. So I figured if I wrote a historical fiction, that I would be able to wake up the normies by putting out a fiction book that they may or may not realize is leading people to the truth. Like I changed the name of the Rothschilds to the Rothsons, And then I put little red pills in there about Sandy Hook and 9/11 and Epstein. And basically, those were the main things I was sort of focused on at the beginning, and also like hidden knowledge, the fact that DNA has genetic memories, stuff of that nature. And then that book basically got 14 people to read it, because no one reads books anymore. So I decided that didn't necessarily work, and I started making video content because I was trying to make a change, and I thought it would be by writing books, but it's definitely not.
Yeah. So your YouTube channel, but was there any topic that kind of gets your attention more, or you focus more on, or maybe you're more passionate about?
Yeah, well, I think it was sort of the red line in the sand was the child trafficking rings that I came across early on in the research, because you start looking into all these topics and you quickly come across the Franklin Credit Union scandal, which is the conspiracy of silence. And then you see other content that kind of starts to wake you up to the issue, like, films like the Open Secret film, even though me and that producer have had some issues. Also,
Is that Matthew? Uh, is that Matthew?
the guy I have issues with, I can't even say his name; he'll sue me. Um, but basically,
No,
it's
just
because I was friends with Isaac Cappy, and Isaac Cappy came out hard against a bunch of people, and one of the creators of that film had an issue with Isaac Cappy, so it was kind of this disagreement there. Um, and then basically all those films, you look into that stuff and you start looking into it further, and you're like, wow, there's no one talking about that. It was really the Epstein ring that was really one of the main focuses early on in my channel. Like, if you see some of the first videos, you'll see hashtag op death eaters, and that was the anonymous movement, to expose Epstein and expose these pedophile rings that are operating at the highest levels of government.
Yeah, I've done podcasts with Nick Bryan from who did the Franklin Scandal book, and also that's why I was asking if it was Matthew from the Open Secret documentary, and it definitely seems like those topics are some of the topics I'm most passionate about, because it is crazy that people aren't aware of it. It's crazy that something that evil could be true, and it's information you want to get out there, but it's definitely sometimes the hardest to discuss. I remember those podcasts, doing an hour and a half, or hour, whatever it may be, talking about and I'm a father. I have two little ones. I have a daughter who's 2, and my son just turned 5 not too long ago, and it's like those topics hit you so hard when you have kids. I mean, they did prior to that, but even more when you have kids, and it's like to do an hour on it. It's like it can be a little depressing, but I felt, I'm sure you feel the same way. Like you feel like you have to talk about it. You can't just ignore it because it doesn't change anything. Just ignoring it, it'll just continue happening. And getting this information out there is super important. What's crazy is like, I thought the Epstein story was going to be like the giant red pill for a lot of people, and it seemed like that for a little bit. But it almost seems like, isn't it amazing how quickly people just seem to get back in their routine way of thinking?
Yeah, it went out of the media cycle rather quickly, and it's interesting that a lot of the people involved with the current coronavirus pandemic are also highly, highly, highly connected to the Jeffrey Epstein pedophile ring, including one Bill Gates, whose connections with Epstein go back into the 1990s. So these people are, they have a way of controlling the media. One of the main things they'll teach you is the best way to control the media is to control the agenda. So if you control what's being talked about, then you don't necessarily have to silence anything, because if no one's talking about it, then there's no reason to censor it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you can only have when I just had Del Bigtree on, we talked about this. It's like you can only have intelligent opinion on any topic if you have all the information. If you can suppress the information or control the information people are getting, then you can change their opinion. You can affect their perspective on things. Obviously, we're both very familiar with Edward Bernays and his, just his understanding of how many things are affecting your decision making and your opinions and perspectives that we're not even aware of. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand, everything from music to lights to colors to so many different things can affect your decision making. And when this stuff has been studied and used against you, it's like it's almost an unfair battle at times, because it's like a lot of people are just going on. I mean, you live in Massachusetts, right? Did you grow up in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Where, well, I don't know if you want to say it on air or not, where in Mass you're from, but are you from near the Boston area, kind of?
I mean, I lived in Quincy and Newton for a while, but I live down on Cape Cod now. I grew up on the Cape.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
So,
Yeah. So I mean, I was born in Portugal, but I grew up basically my whole life in Massachusetts. I came here when I was 4, and but yeah, I mean, it's wild. I mean, the Epstein story, like you said, I had Whitney Webb on not too long ago, and same thing. She was connecting these dots with like connecting the dots with the anthrax stuff, the 9/11, Epstein. Like there's links to with all this stuff, and it's like the thing about researchers, the information's out there, but the thing about why they need YouTube channels like yours and researchers like Whitney Webb is that you need people to find those dots, so and then you can connect them, because a lot of times it's like the information's out there, just nobody's taking the time to actually gather it. And once you do, you're like, holy shit, this person is friends with this guy, or this guy was at that meeting, or obviously the event 201 stuff came out. I mean, all the stuff that's coming out with Fauci. I mean, a lot of people before this coronavirus thing didn't even know who Fauci was. Now you're finding his links to the Bill Gates. You're finding his links to a oxychloroquine test from like '05, and he's on the media saying like, don't take this drug, it's not safe. There's not a whole lot of research about it. It's like, wait, you knew about the success of this drug from like '05 because you were doing research with it. So it's like, it's so obvious. Like if you just look this stuff up, it's like, and then the fact checks bullshit on Facebook. Ben Swan just did a real good video not too long ago about like the third party that's doing the fact check. She's actually linked to the Wuhan lab. It's like when you find this stuff, it's like, holy shit, could it not be more obvious that something more is going on?
yeah, well, I mean, there was also the $3.7 million Dr. Fauci gave to the Wuhan virology lab to do studies on coronaviruses in bats, right? It's like, excuse me, Dr. Fauci, what's up with that $4 million? And it's just like, and they want to silence us on all this stuff. They called us all fake news. They banned Zero Hedge from Twitter for reporting that it came out of that lab back in January. And this is important information. A lot of the stuff that we've been putting out on like my channel and other channels is stuff that would actually help out the American people, and it would help people by letting them know what the reality of the situation is. And we've been right about a lot of this stuff. Me telling people to take vitamin C and vitamin D. That's all been good, useful information. But if you put that out there, it's a violation of YouTube's terms of service and all this nonsense. So how are you supposed to combat this information war when you're putting out factual, good information, they still silence you? It's very, very difficult.
Well, that's the thing that's bothersome is that a lot of, I mean, I'm sharing articles sometimes that are from mainstream media or some type of, mainstream media company or writer or some opinion piece that was maybe a couple months old, but it goes against the grain of the mainstream narrative right now. So they're censoring it. And it's like, wait, this came from, this was an article from January or December saying that coronavirus, everybody's afraid of coronavirus, but the flu's going to completely, surpass it in deaths. Like I remember I shared an article, I don't know if it was from February or sometime early this year. And it's like, now I try to refine that article and it's impossible. Like all I'm getting is like the coronavirus propaganda of like death rate, cases, this, it becomes completely impossible to find good alternative media. That's the thing about alternative media too, is like, I'm sure when you first got into this stuff and I got into it, it was not that hard to find some type of like outside the box perspective. I could kind of go online and find some like website I've never heard of that's doing some good alternative research or whatnot. And today it's like if you use Google, I mean, they're just going to force feed you MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, CBS, like all the same bullshit. So like for you doing research, have you seen it become more difficult, like looking for actual information?
Yeah, and that's why I've started to archive everything, because a lot of times, like, you'll do your show notes before the show and you'll have a whole bunch of stuff lined up, and then you're going through your show and you're showing everyone, you know how my long form show go.
Yeah.
And you're just going through article after article after article, and then you come across an important article that you were like waiting to get to, and it's gone. And you're like, what the hell would happen to it? Well, I'm done with that nonsense. I've been archiving it, which locks it into internet concrete. That way when I go to look and present it on the show, it's still there, you know. And I'm also not driving traffic to these mainstream media sources, because if you go to the archive link, then they're not getting the clicks and the views on Washington Compost or whatever. So not only and then they change the articles too. Like they'll go in and like amend an article. They'll change the title, or they'll change something later if people pick up on it in the truth community. So by locking it in with archive, someone can go back to one of my shows and they'll just go to the description box on YouTube, and in there will be the show notes, and they can go to my show notes, and all of those articles as they were presented on my show will be linked there. So they can go to each archive link and go, here's the article he was talking about, here's this one he was talking about, and it's all there. And if I want to go back as a researcher and find something, that's honestly the best way I've been able to do it, is go to my like Steemit blog or my own description box show notes and go back and find articles very easily.
Is there, I mean, do you use DuckDuckGo, or do you use any like alternative methods of finding your information?
Yeah, I use Start Page, which uses the Google algorithm but doesn't give you your information to Google. And then if I can't find something, I will switch over to DuckDuckGo, because it gives you different search results. So the Google search results are like, you know, from Google, which works with the Chinese military directly, benefiting them with artificial intelligence technology, which is a massive violation. And any other company in America doing that would get raided by the FBI tomorrow. You know, you're not allowed to advance a hostile foreign nation's military unless you're Google for some odd reason. But, you know, yeah, you just have to go and use the best. If you can't find it, use DuckDuckGo, basically, because then DuckDuckGo will pull it up.
Yeah, I found that it's amazing that I can put the exact same thing in DuckDuckGo and get completely different results. I'm like, why is this? You know, and a lot of times I've had much more success finding things, like you said, old posts, whatnot, on DuckDuckGo. I mean, Google just it's easy. I mean, it is just, it's user friendly, but it's gotten so bad. I mean, I had Russ Baker from whowhatwhy.org, and you know, he was telling me, he's like, throughout the years, because his is kind of considered alternative media website, he's like, he can see the traffic just slowly go down and down and down and down. He's like, it's obvious that they're just force feeding you these websites and the mainstream narrative, and it's like, that's why I was saying initially in the beginning of our conversation that like podcasts kind of seem to be like the one place where, like, if somebody subscribes to my RSS feed, they're gonna get unless it's on iTunes. Some people have had issues with iTunes, but on Spotify, on Podcast Addict, whatever app you use, it seems that Google Play, so far I haven't heard any issues. People are getting it, and it's just like, I don't know why. I don't know if it's because of a lack of like sponsor money. You know, on YouTube there's a lot of sponsor money, so it's maybe that's one of the reasons why they're a lot more aggressive there. But you know, you can find podcasts on just about any topic, no matter how controversial, and it seems like, for at least the time being, that you know, you can kind of say what you want and do what you want without people kind of busting your balls and giving you a hard time, which is nice. That's what I was saying. Like, you know, and because you do these long form conversations, I think your show would be like awesome in a podcast form. I mean, the thing is, like, the way you do, like you said, you record it live and you post it. It seems like it's easier that way, instead of having to also put it out audio and do that stuff. But definitely, your long form shows and your long form conversations, I think would be awesome for people like podcasts. But I know not too long ago you were on Twitter talking about music and whatnot. Have you been what have you been jamming out to during this quarantine? Because I'm sure you've been going crazy. So you've probably been going through some music albums and for you young crowd, they don't even know what the hell an album is. But back in the day, there was actually some pleasure in like buying a new CD or new cassette, opening it, going through the artwork, reading the lyrics. I used to be a nerd. I used to go like, oh, who are they thanking? And like what band? Oh, yo, this band knows that band. Soulfly is cool with these guys or whoever. And so I remember it was really like a fun little experience. So who you been listening to? And you remember those days? Do you still buy albums?
It's funny because I got a boat last summer, like a little power boat, and it has a CD player on it and no like input for your iPhone or anything. So I was like, bust out the old CD albums, and I got my old like high school CD albums out. So yeah, I still got my old school albums. If people don't know what those are, there was these little discs that had them on them, and you'd buy them in a store, not online. But yeah, I mean, AWOL Nation just came out with a good one. He's got a song in there, Fiesta Fever, which people think he made somehow like about coronavirus, even though it came out like simultaneously with it. So there's no way he could have done that, but it is like, Fiesta Fever. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's pretty decent. The problem I run into is that I like heavy metal music, but there's no good heavy metal bands that I'm aware of that aren't completely satanic. So, I mean, and that's kind of been a problem for me because I'm Christian and I don't necessarily want to listen to Satanists.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just once your eyes have been open to the stuff, it's so difficult to find like what I call truther music. You go through the extensive list of that in about a week.
Are you aware of like the Architects from the UK?
No, I haven't heard these guys.
Dude, what? The Architects,
Yeah.
they are, and they're, I mean, I believe they're also actually Christian. There was a huge Christian movement for a while in the metalcore scene where like The Devil Wears Prada, Under Oath, As Lay Dying, even though they were obviously, I don't know if you know As Lay Dying's,
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
yeah, but the singer eventually he was juicing up and was having some internal issues and ended up trying to hire a hitman to kill his wife and ends up going to jail. And the next thing you know, he's talking about how like, oh well, some of us weren't all Christian and whatnot. But and then there was, I mean, I remember going to shows and talking to bands about how they were saying how they assumed and knew for a fact that some bands were definitely pushing that they were Christian for the sake of like trying to take advantage of the movement and the genre at the time, which I'm sure that happens with every I guess genre. Anytime it gets popular, there's going to be people who want to benefit from it or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I'm still a fan of Devil Wears Prada. They were one of the I feel like good bands will last even if there's a trend like. You look at like the 70s and 80s, like when the hair metal bands were getting popular, like Metallica was still good for a little bit. After that, you look at Iron Maiden's still kicking ass. Like there's some bands that are like, you know what, they're the bands who did it right and did it for the real reasons. They weren't trying to just do what was popular, but they were doing what they enjoyed, and they end up kind of standing the test of time. Slayer, I mean, people still wear Slayer shirts. It's awesome to still see that. So but you're right. I mean, it's hard too. I don't know how old you are, but like I feel like as you get busier, it's harder to go to shows and it's harder to keep up with new music because it's like you're so busy doing other stuff that it's like going to shows. You'd usually be introduced to one or two new bands because who's this opener? I've never heard of him, or never heard of them or whatever. Or you start seeing like a lot of band shirts. You're like, who's this band I keep seeing on everybody's shirt? So you end up looking them up. But it's like once you get older and you have a job and you don't have the endurance to go to a show, because I feel like it takes a lot of like now I haven't been to a show in a little bit, but like as you get old, you go to a show, you come home fucking beat up, man. I mean, I need a day off you know, just to recover. I'm like, how do I stand on my feet for that long? And it's like, I feel like an old man. I'm just like, damn. And I'm like, when's the headliner's gonna come out, man? Like this shit's taking forever, you know. And when you were a kid, you just didn't give a fuck because you're just with your friends and you didn't think about that. But do you still go to shows or anything like that?
Yeah, I went to last New Year's Eve. I was down in Jost Van Dyke, and they have on New Year's Eve on Jost Van Dyke the biggest reggae party in the Caribbean. So they bring in like the top reggae bands from the entire Caribbean, and the only way to get there is by private yacht. So like there's pretty much small, I don't know, there's probably a couple hundred people there, but there's like celebrities that fly in and all this shit. It's like it's probably the craziest party in the Caribbean on New Year's Eve. And that was like the last like show I went to. I don't know the names of the reggae bands or anything, but it was crazy. It's always the craziest party I've ever been to.
There's speaking of, just because they kind of have a little bit of a reggae vibe to them. You ever hear 1 Minute Silence? They're kind of, I call them the Irish Rage Against the Machine. They're like if you like Rage, I had a singer on my show, and he is like, do you know who Burton C. Bell is from Fear Factory?
Oh yeah, I love Fear Factory.
Yeah.
That was
Well,
one of my favorite bands growing up.
oh, same here. Yeah. Well, Fear Factory, the singer's been on my show, and I remember telling him about having the singer for 1 Minute Silence on my show, and he's like, dude, that guy's a genius. Like he is. 1 Minute Silence. His name's Barry. They call him Yap. Yap is like, well, I didn't know. I listened to him for years. I mean, I watch interviews with him. I always thought he was a little unusual, and like his thinking was really interesting and the way his brain worked. But he has Asperger's, and I didn't know this until like right before I had him on the show, and I'm like, oh crap. But like he just dissects philosophy, and he has such an interesting outlook on life, and like, you know, when he was they were kind of getting big during the new metal scene, when you know, bands like Spine Shank and Static X and all those bands were getting big, and I really got attracted to these guys because everybody liked Rage, but not a lot of people knew about 1 Minute Silence. And as you know, like in the metal scene, you always want to be the first person to like a band. You know, it's always like,
Yeah.
oh, I know a band that you don't know. You know, it's like, and so like 1 Minute Silence was one of those bands where I'm just like exposing so many people to them, because I'm like, dude, these guys, I'm like, if you like Rage, I'm like, these guys are the non-mainstream Rage from Ireland. And the cool thing about their music is that they had a lot of just, as a kid, I didn't understand a lot of what they were saying because I wasn't really political, or I didn't really keep up with social issues. So as I got older, I would go back and re-listen, and I'm like, oh shit, like I understand it now. I get what he's saying, I get what historical event he's referring to, and so it was super interesting. And now it's much harder. It does seem like it's much harder to find any music that has a deeper deeper meaning, anything more than like just talking about the typical I'm depressed stuff, you know. And I mean, there's still a few, like I said, Architects. I don't know if you like hip hop. Low Key is another one from the UK. He's awesome. He has a song that was popular some years ago, Abomination, that got a lot of hits on YouTube. And then Akela, which is a friend of his, Architects. Enter Shikari, that's another one from the UK. I actually had the singer they were a part of like the Zeitgeist movement too. They were, I think they played at the festival and all that stuff. And the problem with them is that a lot of bands like A Word Alive and a lot of these bands, like, they soften up quite a bit, man. I don't know if it's like some bands you want to believe like, okay, just with age you stop being mad, I guess, or you know, you want to like give them the benefit of the doubt. It's like, okay, you didn't just soften up because you're trying to get more hits and be played, you know, in, I guess, play music that can be played in a more bigger audience. But I don't know, man. I still like heavy shit. I still do. And then when I hear bands soften up, I'm like, I'm 35. I'm like, I still like heavy metal. I'm like, I still like, you know, Fear Factory. I still like As I Lay Dying. I still like Unearth and Kill Switch Engage and all that stuff. It's just like, have you seen your taste in music change like throughout the years, or you still like a lot of the same shit?
So we're actually the same age. I'm 34. So we came from the same exact era. So yeah, I remember Spine Shank and I remember all those guys. For me, I went to Tabor Academy, which is like this god awful preparatory school down in southeast New England. and everyone there was a fucking Dave Matthews Band
Oh,
fan, or like the
yeah,
Fish bullshit,
yeah,
like
yeah.
that real soft preppy crap. So I was already edgy just because I listened to anything that wasn't Dave Matthews Band. But I was like the outcast of the prep school society because I was always sort of like that edgy sort of individual. And like I listened to Korn a lot back then. Rage Against the Machine was one of my favorites. And it's weird because they ended up becoming Audio Slave, right, with Chris Cornell. And me and the guy who runs the Metal Den down in Houston, um, we did a report on Chris Cornell's murder, and we forensically proved that Chris Cornell was murdered, and so was Chester Bennington. So and it's like I still was listening to that music, like even up until like the modern like times I live in now. So like, it's weird when I go back and I look at the music that I was sort of more attracted to, like in the hip hop world, it was DMX. In the metal world, it was like Audio Slave. No, it wasn't Audio Slave back then; it was Soundgarden. But now it was also Rage, and all those groups. When you really listen to their lyrics, were all sort of anti-establishment. I just didn't know why I kind of liked them. But even now, like Korn did a music video calling out the Illuminati. DMX has gone out and called them out. Rage Against the Machine has become Audio Slave, and they've kind of, through Chris Cornell, called out the New World Order. It's just weird that like, and Bob Marley was another one I really liked, and Damian Marley, and they're all very anti-New World Order. So once I woke up and went back and listened to the stuff I've been listening to, it really makes me wonder if that quote by Aristotle is incorrect, which is, if you listen to the right kind of music, become the right kind of person, or something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because I had the same type of experience that I always seem to like bands that had deeper meanings, even though at the time I didn't realize how deep they were, or the fact that they were like, that's why I liked them. It was weird. And like you said, now looking back, it almost makes sense because you're like, okay, I get it, because it's like the stuff that I'm into now and the research I'm into now and all the alternative media and news that I'm into now, like it kind of makes sense. And yeah, so it is funny how that works out because, like I said, 1 Minute Silence was another band that was like one of my favorite bands growing up. And I mean, there's other bands that sounded like them, but there's something about their music that just, I don't know, got my attention. And other bands that were like that, I'm trying to think like other bands that I kind of grew up listening to that were like that. I mean, I bet you even some of the bands like, Static X, and like I wonder if I went back and like really looked into what their songs were about, if there was something deeper there than I was probably even aware of at the time. The new metal scene gets a lot of shit, but I'll tell you, man, a lot of good music came out of that, and they influence a lot of. I mean, it was basically like it was heavy music with like stuff you could kind of bob your head to, or stuff that had like catchy choruses. Is like I remember Nothing Face. I was a big Nothing Face fan growing up. Ultra Spank. I was a big fan of Ultra Spank. There's just like, and all these bands, it's like they were heavy, but yet they were catchy at the same time. And that's kind of, I mean, who can dislike that? I mean, you look at As Lay Dying and Killswitch Engage. I mean, that's kind of what made them huge bands, was that like they were heavy enough for the heavy dudes, but they were catchy enough for people who might think that heavy music's a little too heavy for them. It's like, okay, well, they got a catchy chorus, or they have some melody or some clean vocals I can kind of enjoy. Motionless in White is another band that does that pretty well, but that's probably not down to your liking, because Motionless in White really tries to exploit the whole evil gothic satanic thing, but it does make you wonder how much of it's just fun. There's people who like horror movies and aren't going to kill anybody. They just find it fun. I don't think Rob Zombie's going to kill anybody. I just think that he enjoys it, I guess, being creative in that manner. But yeah, so that's interesting. Now, in regards to like researchers and stuff that you're into, is there anybody that you that really, like, when you first got into, like you were saying, 9/11 was one of the first topics that really got you down that rabbit hole? Was there any initial researchers or documentaries or books or anything that really like helped or was super influential in the beginning?
Yeah, and I just want to revert back to you were talking about how like there's some wicked satanic groups out there and stuff like that. Like I appreciate their music. Like I used to be a huge Marilyn Manson fan. I used to be a huge Rob Zombie fan. All those like I still think their songs are good. Like when I'm at a Boston Bruins game and Beautiful People comes on, I'm still like, yeah, you know. But like I just wouldn't rock it out in my car anymore, type thing. But yeah, and in terms of I guess the one documentary that really kind of put things together for me, like in terms of everything, because when I became a truther, I wasn't Christian at all. I was very atheist. It took a lot of realizing that we're up against a bunch of Luciferian Satanists to like come to grips with the fact that I was wrong about religion. But I think Face Like the Sun, his documentaries, were really sort of like the most important ones because like you come across all this information and you're like these people trying to control the world and well then what the hell is going to happen if they get it, you know what I mean, like what then? And that was what I couldn't figure out, and he kind of put it all together with Age of Deceit 1 and 2. I think was really really helpful in terms of getting the bigger picture type thing. And then obviously a lot of the Alex Jones documentaries and things, you know, the one Burmis put out. There's been a bunch of like of those films that help me wake up, and you know, I think Alex Jones serves a purpose, sort of red pill the normies and get them sort of like baseline information, but you got to keep going from there. You can't just go with what he puts out.
Yeah, I always have this like love hate relationship with Alex Jones because it's like I can't bash the guy because I was one of those people that after 9/11, I mean, I ran into 9/11, A Road to Tyranny. I ran into these documentaries and they did, I mean, they helped. They did help with like exposing a lot of stuff. And yeah, does he go over the top sometimes? But some people find that entertaining. That's what makes him a good radio guy. That's what makes him like he gets really upset. And you know what? Like he was at Waco. I mean, this dude was like, he's been in the roots for a long time. I'm sure a lot of that passion isn't just for radio. He really does get upset when he talks about the people that he's fighting. Because if he wasn't, I mean, when he was at Waco or when he's in the front lines and he's speaking out against, you know, what's going on. I mean, he didn't have fame at the time, and he was just, you know, doing a little radio show, and he still was like passion. I mean, basically, it was the same Alex Jones. He was getting upset. He was getting worked up. So, you know, it doesn't matter if he has a million views or you know 100 people listening to him. It still seems like the same person, which makes me think like the passion is real. It's not fake. I mean, does he hurt the movement in some cases because he connects dots that maybe aren't there? But you know what? I'll give Alex Jones a lot of credit in regards to anytime he's been called out on something, he's pretty quick to like, you know, say that, hey, yeah, I was wrong on that or whatever. So it's like, you know, I give him some credit because I know, I mean, you know, people in the alternative media world, when they're fucking wrong, they're instead of admitting it, they just stick to their guns, and that becomes a huge issue because people become married to ideas instead of just being like, okay, let me just, if we're really seeking truth, if our purpose is really to get to the bottom of something or look for information, then whatever path that information takes us, that's where we should go. And we shouldn't be like, well, this was the team that I jumped on. I'm a guy who believes that the towers came down because of some type of lasers, some Tesla technology, and that's what I'm sticking to. And everybody else who disagrees with me is a shill or whatnot. You know, so I mean, I had Ryan Dawson on some years ago, and we did a long ass podcast, but you know, I like Jason Burmis. You know, he was one of the first guests on my show 6 years ago. I truly believe his heart's in the right place. Like anytime he gets something wrong, I think that his purpose is to try to expose, you know, get to the truth and expose, you know, those in power. And when somebody like Ryan Dawson says, hey, like, you know, they knowingly lied or whatever, they're full of shit or whatever. Like, like, wait, we don't know their intentions, you know? Like, I don't ever pretend to know somebody's intentions. Like, people do get shit wrong sometimes. I mean, I'm sure throughout these 6 years, I've gotten a lot of shit wrong. And I'm sure, you know, yourself, like your ideas and your perspectives have changed throughout the years. So it's like, you know, do you find that as a issue with the alternative media?
Yeah, in fact, my Jeffrey Epstein roundtable I put together, which had Ryan Dawson on it,
Yeah, I
was
listened.
was also supposed to have Jason Burmis on it, and also was supposed to have Whitney Webb on it. And both of them were like, I'm not going on air with Ryan because he's just going to attack me because Ryan claims Whitney stole all her research from him, and he thinks Burmis is like a 9/11 fraud. And I wanted to be like, Dawson, I believe in directed energy weapons, guy. Like, you just I wanted to hear him like just lose it over that because he'd be calling me every kook name under the sun if he knew I believed in that part of it. But it's just you can't. I did that role for a while. I thought that was the way to go because some of the things that made me want to really like push back on the disinformation out there was like seeing these like, and I don't want to like swear or whatever, but like seeing these flat earthers get like hundreds of thousands of views on videos that are just total nonsense. And you're like, all right, like this is the truth movement's just being taken away by complete utter psyop artists. So, there had to be some sort of pushback on the psyops, but you can't take on everybody, and you can't, like, I've made mistakes, and stuff like that. Like, if you try to go around and take out every other truther, you're never going to get anywhere because no one's ever going to agree with everything that everyone else says, so there's always going to be disagreements. And like with like Alex Jones, like my big criticism of him is that he's an Israeli shill. And I've recently had some of his producers reach out to me and be like, well, he's really sick of people saying that, so now he's going to start exposing Israel. And you're like, okay, well, I'll wait and see it, But I mean, it's just like one of those things. Like I went after him. I've gone after so many different people, and it's not gotten me any closer to exposing the elite. It's just caused a bunch of useless drama.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the thing too. Is like for some people, when Ryan Dawson, in his opinion on loose change, he talks about how it's awful research and it's this is wrong and that's wrong. But okay, we can nitpick a lot of different documentaries, but at the end of the day, if it plants the seed of doubt about the reality that people think they live in, and it maybe because of that documentary and researching 9/11, and because of that documentary might lead you to a Ryan Dawson or a James Corbett or whoever it may be. And, so you can't say that it doesn't do any good, So when people like that, like they say, oh, you can't, it's complete, horse shit or whatever, whatever they say. And it just like, and you spend so much time fighting against people who actually, like, they're trying to do the same thing you're doing. Maybe you don't believe in, you don't have the same beliefs on every topic. Maybe you differ in opinion. But when somebody like, you, for example, like you don't do a bunch of shows and videos on PedoGate and all, and you talk about vaccines and you talk about all the controversial stuff because you're going to get clicks. No, I mean, you're only going to get your ass censored. So it's like you're doing it because people who listen to your show and are fans of yours, I'm sure are fans of yours because you seem like a sincere person who truly cares about these topics, and that comes off. You can see that, you can sense that. I mean, Joe Rogan for a long time, I think people like myself, when I first started listening to his show, he seemed like a sincere person. You listen to so many hours of somebody talking. Initially, you're like, you know what, I can support this guy because and obviously now my opinion's slightly different of his. But initially, I think that's what people liked about him. It's like he seemed like a real person. And I think when you get a Jason Burmis, when you get whoever it may be, and Whitney Webb, like they're putting out good research. They seem like they really care about the topics. Like, who am I to critique them on one specific thing? Like I might disagree. I mean, Jason Burmis initially, seemed like he was taking the coronavirus hysteria a little bit more seriously. Robbie Martins is another one who was he was on my show. I did a roundtable discussion with Robbie, Charlie Robinson, who wrote The Octopus, The Global Control, and who else was on that? Oh, and Jeffrey Wilson from The Conspiracy Farm. And me and Charlie were kind of on the same boat. And then you could see Jeffrey and Robbie were kind of like, saying like, I think there's more to this. And it's like, but that's okay. We can disagree. Like I still will tell people to go listen to Conspiracy Farm. I will still tell people to go watch Robbie Martin's Anthrax documentary and listen to Media Roots. Like, I don't have to agree with people on everything. So there's this huge issue where like people will immediately call you a shill if they disagree with you on one thing. But I think if somebody's purpose is to do the same thing that I'm doing, and that's expose these people and get the truth out there, then I might be wrong on something. I hope that they don't think, they don't go off bashing my work, saying like, hey, that Ricky's a shill, because he's wrong on this or whatever. Like, so I'm not going to do that to other people. It's like people might get something wrong, but if we're all in the same fight, shouldn't we be focusing our energy on like exposing the real people who are doing harm to the world, not people who are attempting to do some good?
Yeah, it's so crazy too, because like Ryan Dawson is a great researcher. He puts out great work, and so does Burmis, and so does Whitney Webb. And we all need to we can disagree, that's totally fine, but we have to be somewhat unified in protecting each other from the backlash and the censorship that's come at all of us from the very same enemy that we all face, that has billions of dollars, media corporations in their pocket. They run governments. They print fucking money. Like, this is what we're up against. And we're fighting about what took place on 9/11 in regards to like one aspect of the event. It doesn't make any difference. Like, we're still completely controlled. They have the sheeple locked in their homes, scared to go outside. Whether coronavirus is the realest thing ever or not. Like it is never the infighting stuff, and there's these little like things that almost seem like they're put into our community to get people to fight with each other, like, oh, the flat earth, or oh, QAnon, or oh, bring up XYZ psyop, and it's just like inserted in, and it causes massive division in a community that can't have any at this point. We've been so hammered by Google and all these other things trying to put this information out that we have to be on each other's side. Like, we have to somehow get past these differences and somehow support each other. It just hasn't happened yet. I don't know what it's going to take.
No, I completely agree with you. And you're a big sports fan, and I'm a big sports fan too. And I mean, you can use kind of a metaphor like sports. I mean, we're all on the same team. We might disagree on what play to run, or but if we're all fighting for the same purpose, then we have to remember that we're on the same team. Like we said, Alex Jones, Ryan Dawson. I mean, Ryan Dawson is he just has so much information and so many interesting perspectives on things, and a lot of times he gives. Listening to him, I always get a piece of information I didn't get from any other researcher. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't know about that, or I didn't know about that guy, or whatnot. So I mean, I agree with you. Like, I don't think he does any good turning on everybody, because we're all on the same team, and I don't think that I can pretend to know if somebody's intentions are really to deceive people. I mean, if you put a 9/11 documentary out, okay, if you put Loose Change, you think about Loose Change was like one of the biggest 9/11 documentaries ever, and so even if some information was wrong, and there happened to be like 3 versions or 4 versions or 5 versions of it, they were attempting to try to revise it and I guess polish it or whatever. But there's so many people who watched it, who end up going down those rabbit holes. Same thing with the Zeitgeist movement. Like, you might not agree with everything Peter Joseph says in regards to what he thinks the future could be, or what he wants it to be, or whatnot, or even like some of the religious aspect of it. But if you skip all that and you just kind of focus on like, okay, what is he attempting to tell you in the first Zeitgeist? That there is a sense of social control. People do use these things to control people and control the population. It's been happening forever. And so I don't have to agree with him on maybe the religious aspect. I don't have to agree with him on maybe some other, on what the future should be or whatnot. But I think for a lot of people, it helps them go down that rabbit hole and exposes them to maybe your YouTube channel or my podcast or whatever. So I think anything that can red pill people. I mean, that's almost like, I was just talking to Charlie about this on the last time he was on my podcast about that. What is it? Out of the Shadows documentary that came. And so there's a lot of people who I think I was telling him how, like, Robbie Martin, who he's been on my podcast throughout the years, a bunch of times, and I'm a fan of his. But he before I watched it, he he tweeted that he said something about QAnon and like this QAnon BS with he's like, how are people missing this QAnon stuff with this Out of Shadow documentary? And I watched it. I'm like, and I think I watched probably like 80% of it. I think I just missed the end of it, and I didn't get back to rewatching it. But I'm just like, no, there's a lot of good information in here. I'm like, yeah, you could critique stuff like you can any documentary, but I'm like, it's well put together, and it might keep somebody's attention better than maybe a documentary that I could put together, because it seems like higher production, which unfortunately it will keep people's attention a little longer because it's higher production. It doesn't look like some grainy, YouTube channel that, just put a bunch of freaking, still images. Or you remember those documentaries? What was it? The one about oh my God, what was his name? It was he did a JFK documentary. He also did a RFK documentary. Oh, but it was even on Netflix, and it was like really poorly put together in regards to like, you just see like these little cutouts and all this stuff. And it was just like, there's a lot of good information in it, but I couldn't, it was hard to watch it because it was so poorly put together. And it was just, but my point is like, so there, even if you disagree with something, like, I think it can do more good than it can do harm, so even with the Alex Jones stuff, I mean, I think it does more good than harm. It exposes a lot of people to stuff they've never even heard of, like, maybe they haven't heard of some of the CIA mind control stuff. Maybe they haven't even heard of some of the CIA infiltrating protesters and getting in their groups and all that. So it's like there's a lot of stuff that he could expose people to. So I completely agree. This infighting stuff I don't think does any good. And you do an awesome job with, like, you've done a roundtable discussion for the coronavirus, right? You've done one for the Epstein stuff, and you do find these issues sometimes with these roundtables discussions that people are like, wait, he's going to be on there? I don't want him, or I don't like him, or whatever. But is that something that you consciously attempt to do to kind of show that, like, hey, we might disagree on certain points, but we can come together and for the one purpose of trying to have an open discussion about this?
Well, I mean, when it's happened to me, sometimes I intentionally invite people on that I know have issues with each other, just because I know it'll make for good content. But that never seems to end up happening. One of them backs down. So, the other times it's like you just want people with different perspectives on, because you want to see them hash it out, and they don't want to, like, it's like they don't want to do that because they don't want to be proven wrong or made to look bad or whatever. I don't know what it is, but people get so stuck in their ways that it's kind of like, that's not what we're here to do. Like you said, if we're about truth, we got to take the facts as they come in and try to discern based on those facts, and not really do all this, like, setting our feet in stone, being like, oh, it's, this or that or whatever. None of us really know. I mean, does anyone really know what coronavirus is? Or do we just have educated guesses based on stuff that we've found on the internet? Did they want us to find that stuff? I mean, was it planted there for us to find? Do they want us to be pissed off and resisting? These are things, like, we don't know, but we can speculate on, and people can be like, well, the coronavirus is a psyop to distract people from this. And yeah, it could be. It could not be. We don't know. Well,
like James Corbett says, I mean, people say that about every story. Like, they say this story is a psyop to distract you from this. It's like, you can say that about just about anything. And like you said, I mean, the truth is, we really don't know. I mean, Jason Burmis and Corbett just did a video. I think it dropped today or yesterday. And, I was interested about that one right when it dropped, because I know they kind of differ a little bit in opinion. Jason seems to be much more concerned about it, and James seems to be much less concerned about it. But it was nice to see them, like, show that you can have this discussion. Like, it doesn't mean that you have to call each other out or you're trying to prove somebody wrong. If somebody makes a point, you acknowledge that they made a point, and vice versa. And I did a podcast on the JFK assassination, because I would have, like, these researchers on, and I'm always like, I wonder what that researcher would say about his theory on this or that or whatever. So then I end up doing like a 2-part podcast on the JFK assassination, and one of the people on the podcast was Jeffrey Morley, who's kind of opinionated and can I mean, no offense, Jeff, if you're listening, but you can kind of come off a little like a jerk sometimes. And but he he's kind of rough around the edges. When he disagrees with somebody, he doesn't seem to have the best social skills in regards to like, having a disagreement where you don't kind of come off like a jerk, and but he was on, and I knew him and like a couple guys where I had James D'Eugenio and Russ Baker on, and I knew they were disagree on stuff, but it was amazing how a lot of times when I thought certain things that I disagree on would turn into an argument, it didn't. Like a lot of times it was like I even found Jeff going like, oh shit, like I'm like, Jeff, what's your opinion on James's theory on whatever? And he'd be like, yeah, well, it kind of makes sense, but you could see like it almost seems like you could see like his brain working, like, okay, that does make sense, and I think it's really easy to discredit a perspective when you're not having a discussion with the person, and then when you can actually challenge somebody's ideas and hear them give a response, you'd be like, okay, well, that does make sense. And I think challenging ideas and having your ideas challenged is so crucial, because a lot of times I'll have what I think is a well thought out opinion on something, then somebody will challenge my opinion, and I can find myself like trying to gather my thoughts and be like, okay, I didn't think this out that well, or maybe I didn't think this out as well as I thought I did. So it actually helps me, because it's like that way it's like, okay, I got to do a little bit more research, or I have to really figure this out before I say this is where I stand on this. So like I always say, like, you don't really learn that much talking to people you agree with. You learn much more talking to people you disagree with. And if only people could do that without being jerks about it, and you can just challenge ideas and let you. I mean, challenging ideas is the easy part. It's people letting their ideas being challenged without getting defensive or mad or feel like, oh, what are you calling me out, or what are you trying to make me look dumb? It's like, I like when I'm wrong, because it means like I'm a little closer to being right. Like, okay, I got that wrong, so now I'm a little closer to figuring out like, okay, what is the right answer to this problem? So yeah, I mean, I should probably have a question, but I guess I was just kind of stating the importance of that.
No, I mean, I think I see what you're talking about. And also, like, I think a part of the problem is, for someone like me, you come out of nowhere, you make a couple films, you post them on YouTube, you don't expect anyone to see them. You're like, holy shit, I got 100 views, sweet. And then you start to build up an audience, and you get this self-importance to yourself. You're like, oh, I have 10,000 subscribers. I have 20,000 subscribers. I'm somebody important now. I can't be wrong. And I think that gets into some people, and like they just forget that they're just a nobody like everyone else. The people commenting in your chat are just as important as you. Just because they don't have thousands of subscribers, they're equals to all of us. And I think a lot of people, they lose sight of that. And I mean, it happened to me, like, a little over a year ago, I was covering the Tucson thing down with the VOP. And I was like, I don't want to be wrong. I'm relying on Craig Sawyer, and he's a federally accredited investigator. And, I'm putting out information from these, top people. And then I realized it's all bullshit. I was wrong, and I had to go on there and admit it. And it was like a real, like, reality check, I think you would call it. And I think a lot of people kind of need to get that reality check.
But don't you think people appreciated you doing that, admitting that you're wrong?
I think my audience did. I lost a lot of audience to it, but the ones that stuck around are now like even more, fans of the show than they were before. And the ones that I lost, a lot of them are back, So it just took a while to rebuild your credibility, but I mean, you got to do it. There's no way to just bury it and move on without like regaining it, like, and trying to hide it and be like, you see a lot of truthers do that. They'll pull down all their videos on a subject and just move on like it never happened. And you're like, well, why did you delete all your content and stuff like that? And then you don't trust them anymore. So I don't know.
Well, the thing about YouTube too, like I feel like it's almost harder that like I said, the 99% of people who listen to my show are listening to it on their phone. They're downloading it. They're listening on a commute. I don't get a whole lot of attention on YouTube, but yet, like somebody like yourself, where like the majority of your attention is on YouTube, I feel like that's a tough place to put out opinionated content, because people are opinionated right back at you. And have you like learned how to ignore that? Do you still let it get to you, or do you know, or have you done a good job of kind of managing that?
Yeah, I used to let it get to me quite badly, and I would like every day I would look up my name on YouTube, like type in my name and just see like what videos people are making about me today, and you just watch them, and every one of them's negative. They're like this lying shill, grifter. He's just doing this for views and money, and you're like, I just had my boss threaten me over the content I make, and I made $50 on YouTube last month. So what the fuck is this asshole? And you get real mad about it too, because you're like, they're just flat out lying about you, and you're like, they're lying, and it's like some channel with like 50 people subscribe to it, and you're getting mad about it. You just got to realize like you shouldn't even be watching it in the first place. So I would say if you're growing an audience on YouTube, don't ever look at the comments, or I mean, actually you should, because you want to see what your audience is saying to you, but don't ever like YouTube your own name and start watching all the detractor videos, especially if you comment on stuff that I comment on, because it'll just make you angry, and it's just a waste of your time.
Well, that's the thing. I never go away feeling better about myself. Like just like I'll spend time, especially during the coronavirus stuff. It's like people are so opinionated. You share anything, and people are like, trying to debunk you immediately. And it's like it kind of reminds you of like the election. It's like if I posted something that was anti-Trump, people are like, you Hillary loving chill, And then if if I posted something that was anti-Hillary, people would be like, you Trump loving chill. And it's like, Jesus, I'm like, do you guys not get the point? Like, I'm not on a team. I'm just trying to, put out the truth and showing that they're all shitheads. Like, I'm not trying to pick a team, but it's, and then you spend time debating people, and you're like, oh my God, this is way too much effort. And it's like the time I spend, typing this out, and then waiting for the response and typing out another response. It's like, and then at the end of the day, it's like, you probably aren't going to change their mind. I mean, there's some cases where I feel like you might a little bit, but rarely will you change anybody's mind. And you hear it all the time. Like you hear comedians, musicians talk about it all the time, how they'll have 1 billion fans, and you kind of just like, yeah, that's awesome. And then the one shithead who writes something negative will be the one person you remember. It'll be the one comment you remember. You'll completely forget about all the comments that came prior to that about how awesome you are, or keep up the great work, or whatever. Then the one shithead who wrote something will hit a nerve, and you're like, this motherfucker, like, I put in all this hard work, and he's just gonna, and the thing is too, it's like, if you don't like something, then just move on. Like, if I don't like somebody's YouTube channel, or I don't like somebody's documentary, I'm not going to bash it. I'm not going to thumb it down. I'm just going to move on to the next thing. And unfortunately, I feel like the most vocal people are the shitheads. Like, they're the ones, at least on YouTube. Do you think that that's true? Like, it seems like YouTube seems like more than other places, people who are commenting and reviewing and all that stuff are more negative than positive.
I think one of the reasons that happens is because when you put up a drama video, you're getting your own audience to watch it, and you're also getting the audience of your target to watch it. So you're instantly getting two audiences to watch your video. Whereas if you just put up a normal video, you're only getting your own audience. So, and I hate to admit this, I actually did this once way back in the day, was I knew I had a big breaking news story coming out. So I was like, let's go out and start some shit with a bigger YouTube channel than mine. And as soon as his audience is paying attention, I'll stop engaging with him and just drop what I have to drop and gain a big part of his audience, which worked, but it's kind of like a dick move. Even though I did have legitimate reasons to go after the person, it was just kind of, I was trying to play games with the algorithms, and I think sometimes people do that. I really do think that other YouTubers will attack other YouTubers just to gain views, just because they want attention. And then you have all the little secret Gamma Kings that can't get any views on their video, so the only way they can get views is to attack YouTubers. They'll be like putting out PewDiePie videos and putting out, Titus Frost and the thing is, like, when I go at someone, Like if I go at someone I really dislike, like, you know, Jason Goodman and me went at it for a while. I did one film about him, put it out, and I was like done with him until he started reporting me to the FBI and shit. But like it wasn't like every day another video about Jason Goodman. See what I'm saying? There are
Yeah.
people out there that every day they wake up, they make a video about me or someone else they're having issues with every day. And it's like, why are you doing that? You know, is it just to get views and clicks? That's my opinion.
Well, I agree with you. I think they are. And the thing that bothers me is that somebody will have a whole channel, like you said, of videos critiquing everybody else's work, and they don't put out any of their own work. It's like, okay, well, if everybody sucks, then why don't you do your own research? Why don't you do your own videos, put out your own content? And if you can do it, I mean, a lot of times, like when you start a band, I played in a metal band growing up, and you're trying to create the music that you like, that you want to listen to. And it's like, well, you can do that as a YouTuber also. Like if you are critiquing everybody's work, like, well, it's not that hard to start your own channel and put out the work that you want to see. So it's like, instead of going around just bashing everybody else's work, create the stuff that you like, create the stuff that you think should be out there. And but you know, I think a lot of times, like you said, it is just a cheap way of getting clicks. It's a cheap way of getting attention, cause friction. You know, it's like, you know, the reason why nobody can look away from a car accident. Everybody wants to see, you know, what happened or whatnot. People like friction. People like that type of stuff, drama. But it is a shame because, again, it's a lot of energy wasted on each other where we could be using it, you know, really exposing the elite and those in power and getting to the bottom of these stories. So it's yeah, I mean, that's the thing about YouTube. It's like, I feel like it's you can create any, like, it's a great place, a platform, but you know, it just, there is a lot of people who will give negative feedback and I mean, knock on wood, I get more I'm sure, and even with yourself, you can see on your videos, you get way more positive feedback than you get negative feedback. I think, you know, anybody who's putting out good content, eventually you'll have the outspoken fans who really love your work and been loyal for a while, who are going to speak out and tell you you're doing a great job or whatnot. But it does take some internal strength to be like, oh, new comment notification, let me not read that. You know, let me not spend all day reading my comment notifications, because this could put me down this rabbit hole of like, okay, now I got to respond to this asshole, and then he's going to respond to me, and next thing you know, like, there goes an hour of my life I wish I had back. So it's just it is tough. Is there any stuff that you're working on right now? Any future projects or any stories that are really I mean, obviously the coronavirus, has that kind of taken your most of your attention? Because it seems like you're still obviously talking about Epstein, and you haven't forgot about some of these other important stories, and doing a good job also connecting these stories, because they are connected.
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing on with, you know, the exposing of the pedophile rings. I think that there's been sort of a resurgence in people looking at that information because a lot of stuff has come out recently. And I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see some big bombshells in regards to that. We're getting really close to Ghislaine Maxwell being brought in for justice, I believe, or doing her final disappearing act like Jeffrey did. I also think that you're going to start to see, as we get, well, I don't know, it depends on what happens in the elections, but if Donald Trump wins re-election, then I would say about a year into his second term, you're going to start to see some big time arrests. He wasn't able to necessarily do that through the Department of Justice. See, the thing is, like, there's a lot of pushback from the top in these organizations, so like the FBI. And, you know, James Comey just shut down the investigation into Dr. Fauci. But there are people at the lower levels that want justice brought in these cases. So, you know, there's like New York Police Department officers that really want justice for the Anthony Weiner case. They want justice for all the stuff that's going down in the Southern District of New York. And that's why, like, that district is where you've seen, you know, the Weinstein case. You've seen the Epstein case. You've seen the Weiner case, all in the same district in New York. And that's because you have officers that are lower down the chain that are doing the hard investigative work. Even heard Maria Farmer come out and say that it was New York police detectives that reached out to her. And you saw that guy, Chief Boyce, just retired from NYPD last year and said he wants to go out with a bang. I think there's something big coming down the line for a whole bunch of these sicko pedophiles. I don't know when it's going to be, but I do feel like some of them are going to be arrested in the near future.
Yeah,
I don't know when, though.
yeah, I'd like to think so, but don't you think there's also a problem? Like obviously, like this DC Madam was taken out. I mean, so obviously Jeffrey Epstein either committed suicide or killed himself. Either way, somebody let him die on purpose, and it seems like there's just so many people connected to this stuff that they'll do whatever it takes to make sure it's not truly exposed. Because, like you said, the Epstein thing came pretty close to getting headline news, and people were talking about it, and we're talking about links to Clinton, to the Gates, to all these, Weinstein. Like, he had links to everybody. So it just seems like so many people are involved. So it's like, who's going to get them in trouble? The same people who are involved. It's kind of, you kind of makes you wonder. It's like,
yeah, no, that's definitely a solid point. It could very well be that you have another case like Nexium, where Keith Raniere was basically thrown to the wolves, and then no one else inside of Nexium faced any jail time at all. And so far in the Epstein case, we've seen exactly that. So, it could be that the heads of these departments and stuff just squash the investigations and squash any justice coming for these people. That's what we've seen since I've been in the truth community. There's like a small glimmer of hope to get any sort of justice against these people, and I like to stoke that hope, but it's a small glimmer. For the most part, they've done absolutely nothing. And Jeffrey Epstein on court record is a FBI informant. So to think the FBI is going to do anything is not likely.
Well, the thing, he was linked to Mossad, he was linked to the CIA, he was linked, fake passports. It's still questionable where the hell he got all his money, because he was working at the Dalton private school, and then all of a sudden he's loaded and has his private island and private jet and all this stuff. And it's like there really wasn't there doesn't seem to be some real money trail on where all his riches came from, or even where he got all his clientele. Like, why are these people trusting this guy? And yet, like, he just was a math teacher at a private school. So obviously there's way more to the story. It is fascinating. I mean, his story is super fascinating, because I feel like it's our generation's 9/11, or maybe younger generation. Because with myself and you're my age. When 9/11 happened, like, I didn't understand how important it was at the time. I didn't really understand just how deep it was and everything that was going on. Not till some years later, where like this, it's like you immediately know what's going on. You do research, you go down that rabbit hole immediately, and a lot of people like yourself and myself, like, we can find old videos of us talking about Epstein years ago. It's like to a lot of people this is this new thing. It's like no, like, I've brought this up many times, and I'm sure, like, you probably have had experiences where you've talked about specifically Jeffrey Epstein to friends or family years ago, and people look at you like you're crazy, and now it's like mainstream news, and you're like, yeah, that theory, and that you were calling a conspiracy theory before, like, now you believe it because fucking CNN is talking about it, because MSNBC is talking about it. Like, that's the thing that, like, it's bothersome. It's like so many things you talk to somebody about and they look at you like it's too hard to believe, but yet, like, once CNN talks about it, it's like, okay, now it's believable. It's like, it drives me fucking nuts. It's like people have been talking about this forever. This isn't new. Like, this isn't some new character that, like, was just exposed. It's like people in the mainstream media have been talking about, or alternative media have been talking about it forever, and the mainstream media have been doing the opposite. Like, this guy's been getting sued, he's been getting in trouble, and the mainstream media has been completely ignoring it. That's why I thought it was kind of weird that all of a sudden they got the green light to talk about it. Why do you think that was?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's really strange that all of a sudden he got picked up and arrested in New York. I don't know if it has to do with the historical disagreement between Epstein and Donald Trump going back to their real estate dealings, one interesting thing that came out of the Maria Farmer thing with Whitney Webb was that um, can't confirm this, but Maria Farmer claims that Ivana Trump was going around with Ghislaine Maxwell recruiting girls out of high schools in the New York area. So, I mean, and then there's all the pictures of Trump with Epstein, but, he also did kick Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, and he did report Epstein in the early 2000s, which led to his first arrest.
What that came from a Trump report?
Yeah, Trump reported him to the Florida authorities after Epstein went after him for the real estate thing that fell apart. So if it hadn't been for Trump, he never would have been arrested in the first place. Wow. The fact that Trump's Department of Justice arrested him is not super surprising. The thing with it is, though, is like Leslie Wexner is the head of that snake in America, and he is operating free and in the clear. I've been tracking with the Marine AIS service his yacht, the Limitless, and it's gone from Majorca, Spain, down to a bunch of remote islands in the Caribbean that I know. I've been to a bunch of them, and now it's in Palm Beach, Florida, right where Jeffrey Epstein's mansion was. And no one can find Ghislaine Maxwell. She's in this mansion or that mansion or here or there. No one but me is looking for her presence on these mega yachts where you pull into different customs locations and they don't even ask you for your passport. The captain just provides them with the passports he says are on the ship for the people he says are there. No one actually checks. So there's no customs check. You can just go right in and out of any country, including America. When I sail back from the Caribbean offshore and we get into the States, we just pull right into the dock, and then the captain drives over to the customs official and says, here's who came in with me. But it's an honor system. There's no way to regulate it or check it. So, I mean, if they wanted to sneak around the world without having their passports looked at, and they have 200, yard long mega yachts with helicopters and all these other shit on them, why wouldn't she be hiding out on that as it goes from one remote, extremely nice location to another, and no one talks about it? And the other thing is, as you were saying, with the whole reporting on things that later come out in the media and getting frustrated about it, you can go back on my channel and you can see I did a sail by of Epstein's Island before he was arrested last year. We sailed right by it on our yacht. And I had talked to people at the St. Thomas airport while I was there, and they had told me that they had seen, including up until that last year, Epstein going in and out of that airport with like 13-year-old girls listed as 21 and older on the flight manifests, but they were clearly underage, and he parked right underneath the flight control tower. So everyone who worked at that airport saw him going in and out of there, not only with the VIPs, but with the underage girls. And I reported all that, and that's all now been confirmed months later by mainstream media after he was arrested. When I reported on all this before he was arrested. And, the mainstream media finally comes out with this stuff way after me, and they're all getting praise for covering this. And it's like, where was any praise for people like me that went out in front of his arrest and were trying to expose him to get him arrested? We're inconsequential because I talk about PizzaGate. It's just like, it's such bullshit. And the other thing with that is, and Maria Farmer and Whitney Webb kind of touched on this, and it's something they told me as well. And a lot of this is starting to come out now, is they were bringing in a lot of girls from Asia. A lot of the girls that the employees saw were like from the Philippines. And, there's the attorneys for the Epstein victims in Florida tried to contact his Florida victims, which are all American victims. There's over 500 victims of Jeffrey Epstein that are supposed to be in the Florida area. The victims' attorneys cannot find a single one of those people. A lot of the planes that went into that airport in St. Thomas were one-way flights. You'd see a lot of young underage girls from Asia being brought in, almost none leaving. How is that possible? Where are they going? And if you take a look at the nautical charts and stuff, very close to Epstein's Island is the continental shelf. Talking 7,000 feet of water. You know, nothing's getting down there. It's just, and they have mega yachts and stuff. So I mean, just what, and Maria Farmer said they threatened to kill her, you know, because they didn't want her to leave Wexner's estate. So what happened to all those Epstein victims? You know, where are all these underage Filipino girls that were giving massages that are gone? We've seen a lot of the blonde European ones that were like more prominent and probably were served like more prominent people. And there's been a lot of were like offered, you know, Victoria's Secret positions and stuff like that because of Wexner. But where are all the other underage girls that were seen being brought in? Where's all the videotape from the airport, you know, of all these VIPs and these girls going there? There's so much evidence that's just vanished that it's just unbelievable, and they don't talk about it. So,
well, yeah, and that's why the whole thing about what happened to, or why the mainstream media all of a sudden had a change of heart and were willing to talk about it was really interesting to me, because I remember having James Corbett on my show around the time that this stuff was kind of being discussed on Today's show. I mean, every mainstream show you could think of, and we were trying to figure out, like, none of us really agreed on why they would let this just, or why it was okay all of a sudden to talk about it, because for a long time, like, it was like nobody would even bring up the name Jeffrey Epstein on any mainstream media news report. And then all of a sudden a complete reversal where everybody was talking about it. And I'm like, wait, why is it okay now? Like, it wasn't like, this isn't a new story. I mean, this guy has, you know, had accusations for years. So it's like, this isn't a news story. And then there was even that, like, that hot mic video of that lady, that news reporter, who was talking about how she had all the information. They did research, and they had the accusers and all this stuff, but nobody would run the story. I don't know who she worked for. I don't know if it was ABC News.
It was ABC, yeah. Disney, yeah.
And so it's like that. It was obvious that they were suppressing it, but then all of a sudden they were okay with it. So I wonder if, I mean, this is of course speculation, but I wonder if they wanted them in that, like, that was the plan the whole time, was like get so much attention on him that they had to lock him up and there was no way getting out of it, and then, you know, and then take him out, like either take him out or let him kill himself or whatever it may be. But because the whole thing does seem super unusual. But I think when people like yourself talk about Pizzagate and go into this information, I mean, the other thing about Pizzagate is, like, so many people who will completely dismiss it, when you actually sit them down and you say, look at these Instagram pictures. Okay, I'm a fucking parent. Like, those pictures are disturbing, you know, like, they're just, I wouldn't, I mean, go through my Instagram page. You're not gonna see anything even close to that. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you can't tell me that's not a little weird. Then you look at, like, how his links to, you know, the elite, you know, this guy's supposed to own a fucking pizzeria. Like, why is so many rich and famous people linked to this guy? Why is this guy so influential? Why does he have so many connections? Like, there's so many weird things. And then also those emails that were released. I mean, that's the thing about Alex Jones, right? Alex Jones talks about Pizzagate on his show. He's called a lunatic. But then when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast and they talk about it and they go through those emails, and Alex Jones is just asking the question, like, you know, like, what are you talking about when you're saying hot dogs or this or that? Like, you're saying a bunch. It seems like you're talking in symbols and code, and it's obvious you're not saying what you mean, because that doesn't make any sense. So there's something else there. So you can't deny that. And then when you look at, like, the weird Instagram pictures, you can't deny that. So it's like, you can make the argument that, like, yeah, we might not know exactly what was going on, but for sure there's something more going on than what we're being told. It isn't just nothing, like we're being told, like just some crazy conspiracy theory about nothing. It's like, no. Like, a lot of conspiracy theories stay alive because there's fucking fire. Like, where there's smoke, there's fire. And, like, there's reasons why a lot of this stuff, not in all cases, because obviously flat earth is a perfect example of that, but you know, in many cases, like, you know, a lot of these conspiracy theories, you know, they stay alive because it's like there's enough real evidence, or there's enough dots where people connect them. And, you know, Pizzagate was the same thing. It's like, if you really took your time to, like, look into, okay, why do people believe this? You know, oh, they think there's a dungeon down there where they're holding little kids. It's like, okay, if you just say it like that, it sounds crazy. But if you look at, okay, well, why do they think that? And you like, like I was saying, you look at the Instagram pictures, you look at the emails, you look at all this stuff, it starts becoming much more believable. And when you look at Jeffrey Epstein, if that's possible, we can all agree that that's possible. That somebody who is linked to the elite in politics, the elite in Hollywood, the elite in business and investments or whatever, and this guy was a known pedophile. Everybody knew it. He was trafficking girls and all this stuff. Like, if that is possible, why would everything else be not possible? Like, where do you draw the line? Like, why is this stuff not possible, but yet we agree this is possible? Like, to me, it always seems unusual how people do this, like, mental jujitsu to justify their thinking.
The Pizzagate thing is just one of those things that they even created a term, fake news, to try to debunk it, just like they created the term conspiracy theory to debunk the JFK assassination. You can literally watch the algorithms, and you can see that the more people were looking into Pizzagate, the more fake news trended right after it, and they were pushing the fake news thing to try to debunk it. It's never been debunked. We've sent hard evidence against James Alefantis into DCMPD. They've done nothing. They handed it off to Officer Jeremiah Johnson of the FBI. He's done nothing with it. Okay? So they have hard evidence against Alefantis regarding stuff that was found on the hard drive in his pizzeria. Comet Ping Pong never had a fucking basement. That was a mainstream media narrative that they came up with. Besta Pizza, the place right next to it, and Bucks Fishing and Camping, owned by James Alefantis, does have a basement. I've been in the basement of Politics and Prose just looking around, and there was tons of Alice in Wonderland symbolism down there. Anyone who knows anything about that knows that ties directly to pedophilia via Alice Day and all these other nonsense things. There was a lot of hard evidence about Pizzagate, and a lot of it just was denied as conspiracy theory with no good reason why. And the Instagram stuff was really bad. Tammy Lozado, if you remember her with her little farm, the kids in the pool, the heated pool for John Podesta, all these things. And it's just like so blatant. The fact the media did what they did with that just means they're covering up for child exploitation rings. And I honestly think that, the other thing with it too is like they're financially connected to each other. You can directly financially connect the Epstein ring to the Alefantis ring, and you can connect the Nexium ring to Alefantis. Like the same lady who ran Nexium, Pamela Caffritz, her foundation, the Gwendolyn Caffritz Foundation, because she's now dead and it passed to her heirs. So now it's the Gwendolyn Caffritz Foundation. If you go to Transformer Art Museum, which is James Alefantis' art museum, one of the main contributors is the Gwendolyn Caffritz Foundation. That's the same foundation that came from Pamela Caffritz, who was the head of the Nexium cult, NXIVM, prior to Keith Raniere. So how is that? This is a blatant, easy financial connection between the two. You'll never hear about it. Even on a lot of alternative media, you don't hear about that type of stuff. And I just have to wonder why. Like, why is the pedophile ring the 1/3 rail of all of this stuff that you're not allowed to talk about? But then, with that being the case, how in the hell did the Epstein thing go down? I don't think anyone knows, because I was as shocked as anyone else waking up to see Epstein arrested. Like, am I reading The Onion? Was like, what the hell? I have no idea how that happened. I still can't figure it out, because we had no, like, I'd been out there protesting against Epstein in like 2015, and I was the only one in front of the State House protesting that specific thing. There was other anonymous guys with masks protesting different things, but I was the only one specifically like, fuck Jeffrey Epstein. So it's just, I don't know how it happened. I have no idea. Maybe I think the only reason that it could have happened now is the differences between Epstein and Trump. And because Trump is so connected in with all the Zionists, that's how they were able to just take out Epstein, but not take down anybody else. Like Ghislaine Maxwell, she's like a longtime Mossad agent. Her dad's Israeli super spy. Leslie Wexner, he financed the whole operation. He financed Epstein from the beginning. That's where the money came from. It's been well documented that Jeffrey Epstein's only client when he first got started was Wexner. And Wexner gave him that house in New York. So that mansion he lived in, that was given to him by Leslie Wexner. And Leslie Wexner is like a Mossad, you know, guy. He's like literally Mossad and he's mafia. So, I mean,
Well,
I don't know.
remember the book that in the fake picture that Ghislaine had when the people were looking for her, and then she had that fake photo of and she was holding a book, I think, about what was it called, like Mossad's secret super spy or something like that. It was
Yeah.
it was yeah,
There's
she
a
was.
book about CIA assassinations, actually.
Oh, is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was like she was mocking us. I mean, it was like, it's like, haha, like you can't get me, and I'm just gonna make a mockery of the fact that I'm linked to the CIA and intelligence and all this stuff. And till this day, like, why isn't she being investigated? Why isn't she arrested? I mean, people have to ask that question. Like, this is a person who was seen with Epstein over and over again. They're really close. Some people called her his girlfriend. Some people called her his handler. Some people whatever. But she, without a doubt, recruited women. Well, recruited girls. She also had some weird, sick sexual fetishes herself, apparently. Like all this stuff, and yet nobody's asking. Like, okay, well, if this guy's gone, then the next person in line who you can, I guess, use to justify getting or in a way to get some type of justice, you can get her in that way. It's not as good as getting Epstein, but it's the next best thing. Like, why isn't that like a part of the conversation? Why has the media just decided, like, okay, no, we're good. Like, he died. We can move on to the next story. It's like, it fucking boggles my mind.
And the only one they've gone after at all is Prince Andrew. And he's
Yeah.
not facing charges or anything. They've just embarrassed the crap out of him.
Well, he
And
embarrassed himself. Did you see that interview? I'm like,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he won LARPer of the Year 2020 or 2019 on my show for that interview. It's just that he was the best crisis actor of the year, But it's just like, I don't know, like, why him? Why not Wexner or Ehud Barak or Ghislaine? And where is Ghislaine? Like, everyone knows that she's the number two. And like right now, Wexner's yacht is parked within a couple hundred yards of a junior high school down in Palm Beach, Florida, which is exactly where she likes to recruit young girls from. And it's just like, the other thing is Mark Epstein, and I exposed this one on my channel, runs this thing called Aviloop, which is a company that provides services to private jet people. And one of the things they provide are young female models that they have videos for that you can have join you on your jet in their like stripper costume, basically. And this is being run by Mark, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, the guy who inherited the entire estate. And according to Maria Farmer, Mark Epstein was the one running all of the apartments around Epstein's apartment in New York, where the really bad shit was actually taking place. Like Maria Farmer said that Epstein's mansion in New York was where like rich, extravagant people would come, and then they would go from there to like a little apartment across the street that was run by Mark Epstein, where these underage girls would be waiting for, prostitution and things. So it's just like you have to wonder, like, why is Mark Epstein not being arrested? The authorities are letting him get all the money. I honestly wonder if like they were like, well, Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump don't get along, so we'll throw Jeffrey Epstein to the wolves along with a whole bunch of these other cult members that are like the leaders of these things to calm the public down because Pizzagate had gone so viral, And they were like, all right, well, we'll throw Keith Raniere to the wolves and John of God to the wolves and Jeffrey Epstein could get thrown to the wolves, but none of the other people in their networks will. Like Oprah promoted John of God heavily, and she's not in any hot water for her promotion of a guy that was literally doing baby farming. You know what I mean? It's just you have to wonder if they weren't just kind of like, and it's almost that way with Donald Trump's presidency too, with like some parts of his presidency feels like they're throwing a bone to us. You know, like he's anti-immigration, which is a very anti-New World Order agenda. But in other ways, he's very pro-New World Order. Like he's doing all the things they want in terms of foreign policy. So I don't, it's hard to tell. Like maybe they just realized that there was enough of a patriot movement that they had to like kind of keep us in check by giving us like a couple of, like throwing us a few bones, but not really taking out the New World Order system itself. You know, like a head of this cult and a head of that cult will go down, but not the whole network.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I hear it, because I think that the system still exists, and that type of stuff is still going on, even though you can take down one person or another person. But I think this is so deep rooted in the elite, and that you can't just think that all these people that were attracted to underage kids all of a sudden stop being attracted to underage kids because Jeffrey Epstein's gone. Like something more is still happening. There's still stuff going on, and there's probably many more names that are running shit that maybe we're not even aware of. So yeah, I mean, it is scary. I mean, you're talking about Trump and how, like, yeah, sometimes he throws us a bone. Like he almost sometimes becomes like he seems like he's on our side, but then 2 seconds later he's doing the opposite. It's same like Elon Musk seems very similar. He talks about the dangers of AI, and then 2 seconds later you'll hear him promoting AI, and I'm like, dude, like I'm so confused. Like you seem like you understand the dangers of it, and then 2 seconds later you're promoting it and talking about your new technology. Like that's pushing it. So it is weird. But
well, Musk yeah. is another Epstein guy.
Yeah.
Elon Musk hired Jeffrey Epstein to bring in investors for his companies.
Really?
And Epstein is all, yeah, and that was after the conviction. So after Epstein got out of jail for the first conviction, Elon Musk hired him to help bring in new investors for Elon Musk's companies. And Epstein, like Elon, is also heavily invested in artificial intelligence and all of those types of technologies. He's also very good friends with Bill Gates, who's heavily invested and profits off all of those technologies.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, I mean,
how the ring operates.
Yeah, well, that's a crazy thing. It's like if you and I talk about the vaccine agenda or AI, they're like, you're not a scientist, you're not a doctor, but Bill Gates can fucking push the vaccine. Like he became like the leading voice in the leading expert in health and vaccines and medicine, and like he's not a fucking doctor. He doesn't have a PhD. Like, why have we just accepted that his opinion matters? Like, why should it matter just because he started some supposed nonprofit organization? So yeah, absolutely. But we definitely have to do this again, because I feel like we've only scratched the surface. But usually you do these things late at night. That's the best time for you.
Yeah, because I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So until I get them to sleep, it's warfare here.
Yeah, I hear. Like my wife, actually, that's what she was putting them to bed. So because usually it's like now with the quarantine thing, it's impossible for us to put them to bed and us stay up and watch something because they just want to stay up with us. And I'm like, well, it's hard to justify putting them to bed early because they don't really have a reason to wake up early. And so like now we're like, hey, how about we take advantage of the fact that I have a podcast? Then once they go to bed, we can have a glass of wine, we can stay up, we can watch something together. And because if not, then we've been watching nothing, but we've been attempting to find stuff the whole family can enjoy. But it's hard because it's like, how many times can you watch the same stuff? I have broken the rules of parenting and let the kids watch like Step Brothers one night. And I don't know if they're even gonna find this funny, but they did. It was hilarious. And but yeah, it is a weird time, man. But yeah, so apparently we're close in age and we're close in fatherhood too, because I have, like I said, my daughter's 2 and my son just turned 5 in February. So we're going through very similar. And actually, James Corbett, he has 2 kids, and I know he had his 2 almost roughly around the same time I had mine. So we all have like kids around the same age. If we all lived together, we could have a play date.
Yeah, like here's the rebel children. I don't know if your kids inherited the desire to not listen to authority.
It definitely. You know, it's funny, and some of it's my fault because I tell my wife sometimes, I'm like, listen, I can't be that hard on them because I hate rules. I'm like, I didn't like rules growing up. I'm like, so it's like it's hard for me to be like super strict and give them all these rules. So it's like I don't. I hopefully it doesn't bite me in the ass, but I'm definitely like that. I'm like, you know, I try to not give them too many rules and let them, you know, not make them sheeple. You know, you're always a little concerned about that. You know, it's like, you know, you want them to listen and be well behaved, but it's like you don't want to draw the line where it's like they're not thinking for themselves and they're not questioning things. So it's like this balancing act of like, you know, what do I, you know, how much do I put my foot down? How much don't I, you know? And but Sam Tripoli just had twins. You know, he was just on my pod. We did a roundtable swap cast with James Corbett and Sam Tripoli, and he just had kids. So I think the first like 30 minutes we talked about like him becoming a father and all this stuff. And I remember like one of the first comments I got, it's like fast forward the first 20 minutes to the good stuff. And I'm like, listen, fucker. I'm like, you don't have kids. I'm like, that stuff. I'm like, if you become a parent, like that stuff is like it's super important to you. It's like it's the most important job ever, and it's hard not to kind of want to talk about it or share our experiences together and stuff like that. So it's you know, I think I always say parenting's almost like war. It's like unless you actually physically go through it, physically, emotionally, and experience it, somebody could try to recreate it by, you know, with their words, but I could never truly understand what they went through. And parenting's the same thing. Like you could try to explain to somebody like what it's like to be a parent and like the love you have towards your children, how important of a job it seems to you and all that. But I feel like there's just, it can't be quite explained and understood until you actually go through it. So I think all parents kind of share that experience together, and I think that's kind of what connects people. And I find myself disliking shitty parents or people who I don't think are good parents more. It's just like I'll dislike somebody just because I feel like they're a shitty parent. You know, I'll be like, you know, I don't really like that dude anymore because I'm like, he seems like a shitty parent. You know, he doesn't seem to like his kids or whatnot. So it's but for people listening, yeah, well, definitely, it's definitely some more topics we'll have to talk about next time. But for people listening who want to know where they can get your show, how to connect with you, and all that stuff, any upcoming work, let people know your YouTube channel and your Twitter handle and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I do the Titus Frost YouTube channel. If that goes away, then you can find me on D Live, same name. Generally, I do my weekly show Tuesday nights at 9 on my YouTube channel and on D Live. That's the best place to find me. I'm also on Twitter at Imperator Truth. But yeah, I appreciate it, man. And I think the one thing about, like, you just named a bunch of really good YouTubers and we all have kids. I think the thing with that is when you have kids, you're more invested in this fight. And I find it easier to trust people that have children because I know they have to plan for the future and they have to be in this for the good of their own kids. Because I can't imagine anyone not wanting a better future for their own kids. So I think that's a good way to leave it. But yeah, thank you very much for having me on the show. And I'll be sharing this on all my social media and stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll send you the links once it's up and live, and keep up the great work because, like I said, it's not easy to talk about these topics, and I completely agree with you with the kids too. Like I say, I started this podcast before I had kids, and I was motivated before that, but after I had kids, I definitely found like a even bigger motivation because now it wasn't just about like making the world better for myself or making the future, I mean, better for myself, but it's about making the future better for my kids, and that's even more important. And so yeah, absolutely. And then these stories, you know, the pedophilia, the human trafficking, I mean, that stuff just hits home so differently when you have kids. It's like because you always put your kids in that situation or put yourself in that situation as a parent. And yeah, it's heartbreaking. I mean, you know, it's hard to even fathom those experiences. So yeah, without a doubt, I mean, I love people like yourself, like I said, who are willing to talk about the hard topics. You know, I feel like 9/11, JFK, like that was a while ago. People seem to not be as emotionally invested. And they're even though they're dark, they're not quite as dark as some of these other topics. And so I think it does take a special person who's willing to talk about that stuff for the greater good, and to be able to go down those rabbit holes, no matter how dark and disturbing it may be. And I'm sure you find yourself sometimes going down some fucking super disturbing rabbit holes where you're looking at research or whatever, and you're just like super. I'm sure it even affects your mood in many cases, So it definitely takes a somebody who's willing to sacrifice all that for the greater good. So I definitely appreciate it, and hopefully we do it again. Oh, we can do these more often.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Hey, thanks. Have a great night, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. Take care. Thanks, man.
Hey, here. Yep. Thank you.